What if I told you that a civilization survived 2,500 years of invasions, conquests, and revolutions, yet maintained its distinct cultural identity? From Cyrus the Great to the modern Islamic Republic, Persian civilization spans a lifetime few others can match. In this documentary, we'll trace the unbroken thread of Persian identity through millennia of dramatic transformations. You'll discover how a small tribal kingdom became a superpower that controlled 44% of the world's population, created the first declaration of human rights, and continues to shape global politics today. Before the Persians emerged on the world stage, another civilization had already established a complex society in what we now call Iran, the Elamites. Flourishing in southwestern Iran from around 2700 BCE, they are one of the oldest civilizations in the world. Their homeland, known as Elam, was centered around cities like Susa, a metropolitan hub that would later become an important capital for Persian kings. The Elamites developed independently from their Mesopotamian neighbors, creating their own distinctive language and cultural identity. Their language, completely unrelated to later Persian or other Indo-European languages, remains partially understood today. What makes Elamite culture so interesting is how they maintained their unique identity while simultaneously absorbing influences from powerful neighbors. Their art combined local styles with elements borrowed from Sumer and Babylon, resulting in a hybrid aesthetic that showcased both innovation and adaptation. For nearly 2,000 years, the Elamites were major players in Middle Eastern politics. They alternated between trading partnerships and fierce rivalries with the successive powers of Mesopotamia, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria. Elamite kings launched daring raids into Mesopotamia, sometimes capturing important religious objects and royal treasures. In 1155 BCE, the Elamites even managed to capture the statue of Marduk, Babylon's patron deity, in a raid that shocked the ancient world and demonstrated their military prowess. The political organization of Elam differed significantly from other ancient kingdoms. Rather than a centralized monarchy, they often operated as a confederation of city-states, united under a high king. Power was frequently shared between rulers in Susa and Anshan, creating a flexible system that could adapt to changing circumstances. This decentralized approach may explain how Elamite culture survived numerous invasions and setbacks throughout its long history. Elamite artistic achievements laid important foundations for later Persian aesthetics. Their architectural innovations included early ziggurats, massive stepped structures that predated similar Mesopotamian buildings. Elamite metalworkers created intricate bronze objects, showing remarkable technical skill, while their stone carvers produced detailed reliefs that influenced later Persian imperial art. Some motifs first developed by Elamite artists, like specific animal forms and royal imagery, would reappear centuries later in Achaemenid Persian palaces. The written legacy of the Elamites remains partially mysterious. They developed multiple writing systems, including Linear Elamite, a script that still hasn't been fully deciphered. This writing system, with approximately 80 distinct signs, represents one of the world's oldest independent writing traditions. The Elamites also adapted cuneiform from Mesopotamia for their administrative records, creating a complex bilingual scribal tradition. Elamite religion centered around a pantheon of deities, with Shushanak, the god of Susa, occupying the central position. Their religious practices involved elaborate rituals, temple worship, and royal ceremonies that connected political power to divine authority. Certain elements of Elamite religious thinking, particularly about cosmic dualism and specific ritual practices, may have influenced later Zoroastrian beliefs. The civilization experienced several periods of renaissance throughout its history, rebuilding after defeats and reestablishing power. Eventually, the Elamites fell to Assyrian conquest in the 7th century BCE, with Ashurbanipal of Assyria boasting about destroying their cities and desecrating their sanctuaries in 646 BCE. Recent genetic studies have revealed a surprising connection between ancient Elamites and modern Iranians, suggesting stronger continuity than previously thought. This means present-day Iranians might share more genetic material with Elamites than with later Persian groups. Perhaps most remarkable is evidence suggesting that the Elamites pioneered an early form of constitutional monarchy. Clay tablets mention a law of succession that limited absolute royal power. potentially representing one of history's first efforts to establish the rule of law over the whims of King Zaful 4,000 years ago. While the Elamites laid prehistoric foundations in southern Iran, a new power was emerging in the northwest. Around the 7th century BCE, the Medes, an Iranian people who had migrated into the region centuries earlier, began to transform from scattered tribal groups into a unified kingdom. These Indo-European speakers brought new languages, technologies, and cultural practices that would permanently reshape the Iranian plateau. The Medes originally lived in a collection of 6 major tribes across northern Iran, each functioning as independent units with their own chieftains and territorial boundaries. What transformed these separate groups into an empire was the leadership of King Xerxes, who came to power around 625 BCE, recognizing the need for military innovation to challenge the dominant Assyrian Empire. Xerxes implemented reforms that modernized Median fighting capabilities. His most significant military innovation reorganized Median warriors into specialized units, separating spearmen, archers, and cavalry instead of having them fight as a disorganized mass. This seemingly simple change revolutionized warfare in the region and created a tactical flexibility that Median commanders used to great advantage. The Achaemenid Persians later adopted and expanded this system, making it a foundation of their military success. The defining moment for the Median Empire came in 612 BCE, when Xerxes formed an alliance with the Neo-Babylonians under Nabopolassar. Together, these powers launched a coordinated attack against Nineveh, the seemingly impregnable capital of Assyria. After a 3-month siege, the allies captured and destroyed the city, ending Assyrian dominance that had terrorized the Near East for centuries. The fall of Nineveh ranks among the most consequential geopolitical shifts in ancient history, removing a superpower and creating a power vacuum that the Medes quickly filled. At its height, the Median Empire controlled territories stretching from central Anatolia, or modern Turkey, to parts of Central Asia. The stage was now set for their relatives, the Persians, to take power and create an empire the world had never seen. Imagine a vast domain in Central Asia, home to diverse peoples speaking different languages and practicing various religions. This was the Median Empire. To manage this incredible diversity, the Medes developed a clever system of administration, balancing central control with local freedom. This approach became a hallmark of later Iranian empires. But here's the mystery. For all their achievements, the Medes left behind very few monuments or inscriptions of their own. Almost everything we know about them comes from outsiders. It's like the Greek historian Herodotus, or records from Babylon and Assyria. It's like trying to understand someone's life story only through what their neighbors wrote about them. You see them, but it's through foreign eyes, not their own words. Their capital, Ecbatana, now modern-day Hamadan, was said to be one of the ancient world's most spectacular cities. Herodotus described it as having 7 concentric walls, each painted a different color: white, black, purple, blue, orange, silver, and gold. While archaeologists haven't found this exact structure, excavations have uncovered massive fortifications, painting a picture of a wealthy, well-defended royal center. The Median Empire's reign was powerful but brief, lasting less than a century. Around 550 BCE, a new figure emerged who would change everything: Cyrus the Great. As ruler of the Persian tribe and himself half Median through his mother, he found himself in conflict with the last Median king, his own grandfather, Astyages. After defeating Astyages, Cyrus did something revolutionary. Instead of destroying the Median power structure, he integrated their elite's administration and military into his new Persian Empire. Many Medes served as generals, governors, and advisors, creating a powerful Persian-Median partnership rather than a simple conquest. Some evidence even suggests the Medes had democratic elements in their governance, with councils of elders making decisions alongside kings. These traditions may have influenced later Persian models of rule, the most remarkable achievement of the Medes. They successfully challenged the Mesopotamian dominance that had shaped the region for millennia. For a brief moment in history, they were the supreme power in the ancient Near East. Yet, they remain one of history's great enigmas, civilization known almost entirely through its actions rather than its own voice. And so, the stage was set. Around 550 BCE, Cyrus the Great, born to a Persian father and a Median mother, united these rival peoples. He founded what we now call the Achaemenid Empire, named after his family line. This fusion of cultures, this pattern of integration rather than destruction, became Cyrus's signature approach to building an empire. With his position in Iran secure, Cyrus turned his gaze westward to the famously wealthy kingdom of Lydia in modern-day Turkey. King Croesus of Lydia, whose name became a synonym for immense wealth, had attacked Persian territories, underestimating the new empire. Within 2 years, Cyrus defeated Croesus, captured the Lydian capital of Sardis, and absorbed the kingdom's vast gold reserves. This conquest gave Persia access to the Aegean Sea and brought the Greek cities of western Anatolia under its control. But Cyrus's most legendary conquest came in 539 BCE, when his armies marched on Babylon. The ancient heart of Mesopotamian civilization, according to both Persian and Babylonian accounts, Cyrus entered the city without a major battle. He showed respect for Babylonian religious practices and presented himself not as a conqueror, but as someone chosen by their own god, Marduk, to restore justice and order. It was a political masterstroke that turned potential resistance into peaceful acceptance. From the capture of Babylon came one of history's most important artifacts, the Cyrus cylinder. This small clay barrel contains Cyrus's proclamation to the Babylonians. It outlines his policies of religious tolerance and the restoration of local traditions. He describes allowing displaced peoples, including the Jewish people who had been exiled to Babylon decades earlier, to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples. This act is so significant that the Hebrew Bible portrays Cyrus as a liberator sent by God, earning him the unique status as the only non-Jewish person called a Messiah in the Bible. Cyrus built his ceremonial capital at Pasargadae in southern Iran. His tomb, which still stands today, is a simple, elegant structure on a stepped platform, a stark contrast to the colossal monuments of Egyptian pharaohs. Its modest design seems to reflect the practical nature of his rule. Even after 2,500 years, this tomb remains a powerful symbol of Iranian national identity, a direct link to their pre-Islamic past. How did he govern such a vast and diverse territory, stretching from the Mediterranean to Central Asia? Cyrus developed the satrapy system. He divided the empire into provinces or satrapies, each ruled by a governor, or satrap, who answered directly to him. This system brilliantly balanced central authority with local autonomy. Subject peoples could keep their own customs and religions as long as imperial revenue and security were maintained. Unlike so many conquerors of the ancient world who enslaved defeated populations and forced their own beliefs upon them, Cyrus championed cultural and religious diversity. This wasn't just idealism, it was pragmatic governance. It reduced resistance, created stability, and established a new model for a multicultural empire that would influence rulers for centuries to come. Cyrus the Great died in 530 BCE while campaigning in Central Asia, but his legacy was just beginning. 2 centuries later, when Alexander the Great conquered Persia, he made a special journey to visit Cyrus's tomb and ordered its protection. Even more remarkably, Cyrus's principles of governance have echoed through the ages. Thomas Jefferson, one of America's founding fathers, owned 2 copies of a biography of Cyrus, and the Cyrus cylinder has been displayed at the United Nations headquarters, hailed as an ancient precursor to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's an extraordinary testament to how one ancient ruler's ideas on tolerance, justice, and humanity continue to resonate in our modern world. Following Cyrus the Great's death, the Persian Empire teetered on the brink of chaos. His son Cambyses, too, conquered Egypt, but met a mysterious end, sparking a massive succession crisis. Who could possibly hold this young, sprawling empire together? Enter Darius, a distant relative of the royal family. In 522 BCE, he seized the throne, but his claim was far from secure. He had to fight, and fight he did. How do we know this? Darius himself told us. Carved high on a cliff face in western Iran is the Behistun inscription, one of the most important documents from the ancient world. This massive stone relief, written in 3 languages, shows Darius triumphant, with his foot on the chest of the main pretender, while 9 other rebel leaders stand bound before him. It was both a powerful piece of propaganda, cementing his right to rule, and the very key that allowed 19th-century scholars to finally decipher cuneiform script. With his rule secured, Darius didn't just maintain the empire, he expanded it to its absolute zenith. Persian armies marched east to the Indus River in modern Pakistan, north into the Caucasus Mountains, and west across North Africa, even pushing into southeastern Europe. At its peak, the Achaemenid Empire covered an astonishing 5.5 million square kilometers, holding nearly half of the world's entire population at that time. Imagine that. Almost 1 out of every 2 people on Earth lived under Persian rule. But how do you manage such a vast and diverse territory? Darius refined a system of provincial governance started by Cyrus, known as satrapies. He divided the empire into about 20 provinces, but with a clever twist. Each province was overseen by 3 officials: a governor, a military commander, and a secretary. Crucially, all 3 reported directly and separately to the king. This brilliant separation of powers created a system of checks and balances, ensuring no single official could become too powerful and challenge the throne. To keep everyone honest, Darius employed royal inspectors, known as the eyes and ears of the king, who traveled the empire. Monitoring local affairs and reporting straight back to him, Darius also revolutionized the economy, introduced the first standardized currency system to span multiple continents. The gold daric and the silver siglos became reliable mediums of exchange, supercharging trade and making tax collection much more efficient. He standardized weights and measures, creating a unified economic zone from Egypt all the way to India. It was a level of economic integration the world had never seen before. Perhaps his most legendary achievement was the Royal Road. This highway stretched over 2,500 kilometers from Sardis, near the Aegean Sea, to Susa, in southwestern Iran. But it was more than just a road. Along its length, Darius established a network of relay stations, each with fresh horses and riders. This ancient postal service, the original Pony Express, could carry a message across the entire empire in about 7 days. To put that in perspective, a regular traveler would need 3 months to make the same journey. The speed of information was a critical tool for holding his empire together. To reflect the empire's grandeur, Darius began construction on a new ceremonial capital, Persepolis. The city of the Persians, built on a massive terrace against a mountain, it was a masterpiece of imperial architecture. Soaring columned halls and intricate stone staircases depicted delegates from every corner of the empire bringing tribute. These buildings weren't just Persian. They blended architectural styles from Egypt, Babylon, and Lydia, creating a unique visual language that screamed, "This is the center of the world." But not every venture was a success. His campaign against the nomadic Scythians north of the Black Sea was inconclusive. More significantly, his attempt to punish Athens for supporting a Greek revolt in Ionia led to a surprising defeat at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. While a relatively minor setback for the vast Persian Empire, this single battle would echo through history. When Darius died in 486 BCE, he left behind an empire of unprecedented size, wealth, and sophistication. His administrative genius was so effective that his systems were studied and adopted by later empires, including the Romans. 2,000 years later, even the British East India Company would look to Persian provincial management for lessons in colonial governance. It's a stunning testament to his lasting impact. Darius's son Xerxes inherited not just an empire, but also his father's unfinished business with the Greeks. For Persia, Marathon was a minor sting on the far western edge of their domain. But for Xerxes, it was a matter of honor. He had to demonstrate Persian power and bring the troublesome Greek city-states to heel. The preparations for this new Greek campaign were monumental. For 4 years, Xerxes gathered supplies, built a massive fleet, and conscripted troops from every nation under his rule. The resulting army was a living tapestry of the empire's diversity. Egyptians, Babylonians, Scythians, Ethiopians, and dozens of other peoples, all marching under the Persian banner. In the spring of 480 BCE, Xerxes faced his first great obstacle, crossing the Hellespont, the strait separating Asia from Europe. His engineers built 2 incredible pontoon bridges, using hundreds of ships lashed together. But when a storm destroyed them, the ancient historian Herodotus tells a bizarre story. Xerxes supposedly ordered the sea to be whipped and branded with hot irons, while the engineers were executed. While this was likely a Greek misunderstanding of a Persian religious ritual to appease the gods, it shows the immense pressure Xerxes was under. The rebuilt bridges worked, and his army, so vast that Herodotus claimed it drank entire rivers dry, marched into Europe. As the Persian juggernaut moved south, most Greek cities quickly submitted, offering the symbolic earth and water as tokens of surrender. But two city-states stood defiant: Athens and Sparta. When Persian messengers arrived in Sparta, the Spartans famously threw them into a well, telling them to find their earth and water there. The line was drawn. The first major showdown came at a narrow coastal pass called Thermopylae. Here, a small Greek force led by 300 legendary Spartan warriors made their stand. For 3 days, they held back the overwhelming Persian numbers in one of history's most famous last stands, becoming an eternal symbol of courage against impossible odds. Imagine this: a massive Persian army, seemingly unstoppable, is flanked and defeated. Militarily, it was a Persian win, but Thermopylae became an immortal symbol of Greek defiance, a story that still gives us chills today. With the path to southern Greece wide open, the Persian king, Xerxes, marched on Athens, burning it to the ground. He had achieved his goal. But just as victory seemed certain, disaster struck. In the narrow straits of Salamis, the massive Persian fleet found its numbers to be a crippling weakness. The smaller, more agile Greek ships danced around them, sinking or capturing over 200 Persian vessels. From his golden throne on the shore, a horrified Xerxes could only watch as his naval power was shattered. Defeated at sea, Xerxes retreated to Asia with the bulk of his army, leaving his general, Mardonius, to finish the job. But it was not to be. The next year, at the Battle of Plataea, the Greeks decisively crushed the remaining Persian forces, ending the invasion for good. Despite this setback in the west, the Persian Empire under Xerxes was far from finished. It remained a powerhouse of wealth and influence. Xerxes picked up where his father, Darius the Great, left off, embarking on monumental building projects in the capital, Persepolis. He completed the awe-inspiring Gate of All Nations and the magnificent 100-column hall. These weren't just buildings, they were statements. Colossal, bull-headed columns and intricate stone reliefs broadcasted the sheer might of the Persian Empire to all who saw them. But beneath the glittering surface, cracks were beginning to show. Xerxes' reign came to a sudden and violent end in 465 BCE. He was assassinated in a palace conspiracy. It's a plot led by his own bodyguard commander. This shocking act of betrayal exposed a growing weakness at the very heart of the empire. We often focus on the wars with Greece as the turning point. The real long-term threat was brewing within. The court was a viper's nest of intrigue. Succession struggles became bloody and common, and provinces grew restless. This internal rot would slowly eat away at the foundations of Achaemenid power for the next century. Fast forward to the mid-4th century BCE, the once mighty Achaemenid Empire is a shadow of its former self. On the throne sits Darius III, who ascended in 336 BCE, but being king wasn't what it used to be. The court was paralyzed by constant power struggles. Royal family members and ambitious officials were always scheming, always plotting. Out in the provinces, rebellions were becoming more and more frequent. To fund a lavish and decadent court lifestyle, taxes grew heavier, squeezing the life out of the empire's subjects. The incredible administrative efficiency that had been the bedrock of Persian power 2 centuries earlier had crumbled away. And into this weakened, divided empire strode its greatest challenge yet, the young, brilliant, and utterly ruthless king from Macedonia, Alexander. Having united the fractious Greek city-states, he crossed into Asia Minor in 334 BCE with an army of around 40,000 men. He was drastically outnumbered, but his army was a well-oiled machine of disciplined professionals, armed with revolutionary new tactics. Their first major clash was at the Battle of the Granicus. In a move of staggering audacity, Alexander personally led his cavalry in a charge straight through the Persian line. This wasn't just a military maneuver. It was a statement of intent. This was how Alexander would fight, and this was how he would win. The boldness he showed that day would become his signature throughout his entire legendary campaign. The following year, Darius III decided to take matters into his own hands. He gathered a colossal army, perhaps as many as 100,000 soldiers, to face Alexander at Issus. But Darius made a fatal mistake. He chose a battlefield so narrow that his superior numbers meant nothing. When Alexander's elite cavalry smashed into his flank, threatening his personal position, Darius panicked. He fled. He abandoned his army, his royal tent, and even his own family, his mother, wife, and daughters. This single act of cowardice shattered Persian morale and destroyed his credibility as a king. In a remarkable display of character, Alexander captured Darius's family but treated them with the utmost respect, a gesture almost unheard of in the brutal world of ancient warfare. With the Persian army in chaos, Alexander didn't immediately chase Darius. Instead, he methodically moved down the Mediterranean coast, securing vital ports and supply lines before turning his sights inland. He marched into the legendary city of Babylon in 331 BCE without a fight. The priests and officials, seeing which way the wind was blowing, welcomed him as a liberator. From there, he captured Susa, another imperial capital, and with it, a treasury so vast it could finance his campaign for years to come. The final symbolic act of this epic conquest came at Persepolis in 330 BCE, after his troops looted the city. Treasure so immense it reportedly took 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels to carry it all, away Alexander allowed his men to plunder the city itself. Then, according to ancient accounts, during a drunken party, Alexander and his companions set the magnificent palace complex ablaze. Whether it was a calculated act of revenge for the burning of Athens, or a drunken accident, we may never know for sure. But the destruction of Persepolis was more than just burning a building. It was the psychological demolition of the Achaemenid dynasty. Meanwhile, Darius III was a king on the run, desperately trying to raise another army in the east. But his own officials, seeing his cause was lost, turned on him. Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, arrested Darius and, as Alexander's forces closed in, had him murdered. Alexander, ever the strategist, pursued Bessus across Central Asia, eventually capturing and executing him. In a masterful political move, Alexander presented himself not as a foreign conqueror, but as the rightful successor to the Persian throne, avenging the death of the murdered king. As Alexander cemented his control over this vast new territory, he began a radical policy of cultural fusion. He started wearing Persian royal clothing, adopted Persian court rituals, and crucially, appointed Persians to powerful administrative roles alongside his own Greeks and Macedonians. This didn't sit well with many of his own men, who saw the war as a simple mission of vengeance against their old enemy. Alexander went even further, marrying Persian noblewomen, like the famous Roxana, and orchestrating a mass wedding at Susa, where he urged his officers to take Persian wives. He wasn't just conquering an empire, he was trying to build a new, blended civilization. The fall of the Achaemenid Empire in 330 BCE marked the end of 2 centuries of unparalleled Persian dominance. When Alexander entered Persepolis, he found the greatest concentration of wealth in the ancient world. Over 120,000 talents of gold and silver, and even in the midst of all this destruction, he made a point to visit the tomb of Cyrus the Great. Finding it desecrated, he was furious. He ordered it immediately restored and the Vandals punished. It was a clear signal. He intended not just to conquer Persia, but to inherit its imperial legacy as his own. But then, the unexpected happened. In 323 BCE, at the height of his power, Alexander died suddenly in Babylon. With no clear heir, his enormous empire, forged by his singular genius, was thrown into chaos. His ambitious generals circled like vultures, and the unified realm he had built quickly shattered into warring factions. Out of this turmoil, one man emerged. Seleucus I, a former cavalry commander under Alexander. In 312 BCE, he seized control of Babylon, and from there, began to piece together the eastern fragments of Alexander's legacy. His new empire, the Seleucid Empire, would eventually stretch from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the borders of India, encompassing the Iranian plateau and Mesopotamia. But the Seleucid rulers faced a monumental challenge. How could a small minority of Greeks and Macedonians effectively govern these vast lands and their massive native populations? It was a question that would define the next chapter in the long and storied history of this incredible region. Imagine an empire born from the dreams of Alexander the Great, a kingdom where Greek columns rose beside ancient Persian temples. This wasn't a fantasy. It was the Seleucid Empire, a fascinating and often overlooked chapter in world history. When Alexander's vast empire shattered after his death, his general Seleucus I seized the largest piece, the sprawling heartland of the former Persian Empire. But how do you rule millions of people from a completely different culture? The Seleucid solution was bold: build Greece in the heart of Asia. They established new Greek-style cities across their domain, with the crown jewel being Seleucia Tigris, near modern-day Baghdad. This wasn't just a settlement. It was a planned metropolis with a perfect grid layout, grand temples, theaters, and gymnasiums. It grew so fast it soon rivaled ancient Babylon in size and splendor. In these urban centers, Greek became the language of power. Official documents, coins, and inscriptions were all in Greek. If you wanted to get ahead, you went to the gymnasium, not just to exercise, but to absorb Greek culture, philosophy, and art. This created a clear divide: the Hellenized, Greek-speaking elite in the cities, and everyone else. But you can't just erase thousands of years of culture. While the cities buzzed with Greek, out in the countryside and the rugged highlands, Persian traditions held strong. People continued to speak their own languages, worship at their Zoroastrian fire temples, and live by their ancient customs. Zoroastrianism remained the true faith for most of the population. The Persian language, though stripped of official status, was the language of the home and the village, a quiet thread of cultural unity waiting for its moment. This empire, stretching from modern-day Turkey to India, was a giant with weak knees. The Seleucids were in a constant struggle. To the west, the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt was a bitter rival. To the east, the Mauryan Empire in India pushed against their borders. Internally, the sheer size of the empire was a nightmare for communication. Provincial governors, far from the king's eye, often behaved like independent rulers, and whenever a king died, it was a free-for-all. Royal succession wasn't a smooth handover. It was a bloody civil war, with brothers, uncles, and cousins fighting for the throne. These constant internal conflicts slowly chipped away at the empire's foundations, creating power vacuums. In this cultural crucible, something new began to form. A hybrid Greco-Ian elite emerged. The Persian nobles saw the writing on the wall. They learned Greek, adopted Greek customs, and took positions in the military and government. They became the crucial link between the Greek rulers and the local population. Marriages between Greek settlers and the local Persian aristocracy created families who were comfortable in both worlds. Archaeologists have found homes from this period filled with a mix of Greek pottery and traditional Persian household items. A snapshot of this complex cultural blend happening at a personal, everyday level. But the Seleucids' grip was slipping, especially in the east. In the mid-3rd century BCE, the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, what is now Afghanistan, broke away, creating its own unique fusion of Greek and Central Asian culture. But a more significant threat was brewing. Around 247 BCE, a nomadic Iranian tribe called the Parthians began to rise in the northeast. This was the beginning of the end for Seleucid rule in Iran. What's truly fascinating is how the Seleucid rulers themselves had to adapt. Despite promoting a Greek identity, their official portraits often show them wearing Persian-style clothing when addressing their Eastern subjects. They were smart enough to know who their audience was. Some kings even made offerings at Zoroastrian temples to win over the local population. They didn't dismantle the old Persian administrative system. They just added a layer of Greek governance on top, creating a pragmatic hybrid structure. But this was ultimately not enough. Their failure to truly win over the heartland, their inability to penetrate the deeply rooted culture of rural Persia, meant that their Hellenistic project was built on sand. The Persian spirit was just waiting for the right political shift to reclaim its destiny. That shift came in the form of the Parthians. As the Seleucid Empire fractured, this new power emerged from the northeastern plains of Iran. Originally a nomadic tribe, their leader Xerxes I established an independent kingdom around 247 BCE. What began as a small rebellious state would grow into a mighty empire, reviving Iranian power after centuries of foreign rule. The early Parthian leaders were shrewd. They saw the cracks in the Seleucid Empire, the overstretched borders, the endless civil wars, and they exploited them brilliantly. Methodically, they expanded their territory, conquering the vast Iranian plateau region by region. By the 1st century BCE, they had built an empire that stretched from the Euphrates River in the west to the Hindu Kush Mountains in the east. This strategic position made them the powerful intermediary between two of the world's other superpowers, the Roman Empire to the west and Han Dynasty China to the east. The legendary Silk Road ran right through their domain, and they grew fabulously wealthy by controlling this vital artery of trade. Their success wasn't just political, it was built on military genius. The Parthian army was a cavalry-focused force, and it was revolutionary. They perfected a two-punch combination of horsemen. First, you had the cataphracts. These were the tanks of the ancient world, heavily armored knights, where both rider and horse were covered in scale or mail armor. They wielded long lances and would crash into enemy lines like a tidal wave, breaking infantry formations with pure shock and awe. Backing them up were the master horse archers. Lightly armored and incredibly mobile, they wielded powerful composite bows. They perfected a tactic that terrified their enemies and became legendary: the Parthian shot. They would pretend to retreat, luring the enemy into a chaotic pursuit. Then, at the perfect moment, the archers would twist around in their saddles and unleash a devastating volley of arrows on their pursuers. Conventional armies like the Romans, who relied on disciplined infantry, had no answer for this hit-and-run style of warfare. It was a tactical nightmare. Politically, the Parthian Empire was very different from the centralized empires before it. It was more like a feudal system. The Parthian king, the king of kings, relied on the support of powerful noble families who ruled their own lands and had their own armies. This kept the local lords happy and loyal, but it was also a source of chronic instability. Succession was often a messy business, with these powerful families backing different claimants to the throne, leading to frequent internal rivalries and civil wars. A Parthian king often spent as much time managing his own nobles as he did fighting the Romans. Culturally, the Parthians performed a brilliant balancing act. They presented themselves as the restorers of Persian tradition after the Greek interlude. They revived Zoroastrianism, promoted local Iranian customs, and gradually brought back Persian administrative practices. But they were also pragmatists. They understood the value of the Hellenistic culture they had inherited. Their coins often featured Greek inscriptions alongside Persian imagery. Their art and architecture blended Iranian themes with Greek techniques. This cultural fusion was a key part of their success, allowing them to appear as legitimate rulers to the diverse peoples within their empire. Their capital city, Ctesiphon, near modern Baghdad, became a massive commercial and political hub, a symbol of their power and a testament to their unique synthesis of East and West, setting the stage for the next great chapter in Iranian history. The Parthians weren't just skilled horsemen. They were masters of strategy. Their greatest military triumph came in 53 BCE at the Battle of Carrhae. The Roman general Crassus, hungry for a victory to rival his famous partners Pompey and Caesar, marched a massive army into Parthian lands. But the Parthians used the desert to their advantage. Their lightning-fast cavalry encircled the Roman legions, raining arrows down on them. The result was a total disaster for Rome. Crassus himself was killed, and the Parthians captured the sacred Roman military standards, those iconic eagle emblems. This humiliating defeat echoed through Rome for generations and cemented the Parthians as Rome's most feared eastern enemy. The Parthians were immensely proud of this victory. They put captured Roman soldiers to work building new cities and proudly displayed the captured eagles in public ceremonies. It would be decades before these symbols of Roman might were diplomatically returned to Emperor Augustus. What's even more fascinating is that Chinese historical records, referring to the Parthian Empire as Anxi, describe diplomatic missions and thriving trade along the Silk Road. The Parthians were the crucial middlemen in the first truly global network, connecting the economies and ideas of East and West long before our modern era of globalization. But after centuries of ruling a loose confederation of territories, a new dynasty rose from within Persia, ready to forge a new identity and challenge Rome once again. In 224 CE, a local Persian ruler named Ardashir defeated the last Parthian king in battle. Claiming to be a descendant of the legendary figure Sazan, Ardashir founded what would become known as the Sasanian Empire, the last great Persian dynasty before the Islamic conquest. Unlike the decentralized Parthians, the Sasanians built a powerful centralized state with the king at its absolute center. Ardashir and his successors made a conscious effort to revive the glory of the ancient Achaemenid Empire. They commissioned massive rock reliefs, carving their own images next to the ancient monuments of Darius and Xerxes, creating a visual link between their rule and the Golden Age of Persia. This Persian revival was deeply tied to the Zoroastrian religion, which became the official state faith. Fire temples dedicated to the god Ahura Mazda sprung up across the empire. Zoroastrian priests gained enormous political power, with the head priest, the Mobad, serving as a key advisor to the king. Religious courts enforced orthodox beliefs, and inscriptions from this time speak of the twin pillars of throne and altar holding up Persian civilization. The most celebrated Sasanian ruler, Shapur I, accomplished something no Persian king had ever done before. He captured a Roman emperor in battle. In 260 CE, his forces surrounded and captured Emperor Valerian near the city of Edessa. This incredible victory was immortalized in a massive rock carving at Nakshi Rostam, showing a triumphant Shapur on horseback with Valerian kneeling before him. Roman writers claim Valerian spent the rest of his life as Shapur's personal footstool, though Persian accounts suggest he was treated with more dignity. Sasanian cities were marvels of engineering and art. The capital, Ctesiphon, was home to the Tak Khosra, a gigantic vaulted hall with an arch spanning over 27 meters, the largest unreinforced brick arch in the world. Parts of it are still standing today. Even more important was the city of Gundashupur. Its academy and hospital became one of the ancient world's greatest centers of learning, attracting scholars from across the known world. Especially after the Byzantine Emperor Justinian closed the philosophical schools in Athens in 529 CE, sending many Greek intellectuals eastward. Sasanian culture was rich and influential. Their distinctive silverwork, often showing royal hunting scenes, their beautiful textiles with intricate patterns, and their elaborate stucco decorations left a lasting legacy. It was during this period that the game we know as chess, then called Chatrong, likely developed before spreading across the globe. Games like backgammon and the sport of polo were also formalized under Sasanian patronage. Militarily, the empire's strength lay in its elite heavy cavalry, the Savarin. These noble warriors were clad in heavy armor. Their tactics and equipment would later influence the knights of medieval Europe. The distinctive Sasanian helmet, with its chainmail faceguard, offered a level of protection that was unheard of in the ancient world. Despite its immense power and cultural achievements, the Sasanian Empire was locked in a constant draining struggle with its old rival to the west. In the early 7th century, the Sasanian king Khosrow II launched a massive invasion of the Byzantine Empire. He achieved stunning initial success, capturing Jerusalem and even laying siege to Constantinople. But the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius mounted a brilliant and devastating counterattack. The war that followed lasted for over 25 years and left both empires utterly exhausted. This mutual destruction proved to be catastrophic. Just as the Sasanians were trying to recover, a new dynamic force emerged from the Arabian Peninsula. In the 630s CE, Arab Muslim armies, filled with religious zeal and military innovation, began to push into Sasanian territory. The empire, with its treasury empty and its armies depleted from the long war with Byzantium, was in no condition to resist. The first major showdown came in 636 CE at the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah. The Sasanian army, commanded by the general Rostam Farrokhzad, initially had the upper hand with their war elephants and superior numbers. The battle raged for days. But then, a sandstorm blew into the faces of the Persian soldiers, and combined with clever Arab tactics, the tide turned dramatically. Rustam himself was killed, and the Sasanian army collapsed, opening the heartland of Mesopotamia to the invaders. This defeat was the beginning of the end. Over the next few years, Arab armies systematically conquered Persian territories. The final blow to Sasanian resistance came as the Islamic conquest spread across the land. By 651 CE, the last Sasanian emperor, Yazdegerd III, was killed while fleeing eastward. His death marked the end of his dynasty and over 1,000 years of pre-Islamic Persian rule, ushering in a new era for Persia and the world. What an incredible and dramatic history. The rise and fall of these two great empires shaped the course of the ancient world. The decisive moment came in 642 CE at the Battle of Nahavand. Arab forces shattered the main Persian army in a victory so complete, Muslim chroniclers called it the Victory of Victories. This battle broke the back of organized Sasanian resistance, flinging open the gates to the vast Iranian plateau. The last Sasanian emperor, Yazdegerd III, became a fugitive, desperately seeking allies to reclaim his crumbling throne. His story ends tragically in 651 CE, assassinated by a local miller near Merv, in Central Asia, an inglorious end for a dynasty that had reigned for over 4 centuries. Now, this conquest wasn't an overnight collapse like you might see in a movie. Many Persian cities and regions resisted fiercely for years. Others were more pragmatic, negotiating surrender terms that let them keep a degree of autonomy in exchange for paying tribute. The rugged, mountainous regions of northern Iran, for example, remained independent for generations. This gradual process meant that much of the sophisticated Persian administrative system stayed in place, providing a sense of continuity even as the political landscape was redrawn. The religious transformation was even slower. For more than a century after the invasion, Zoroastrians, the followers of Persia's ancient faith, were still the majority in many areas. Islam first took root in cities and along bustling trade routes, while the countryside clung to its traditional beliefs for much longer. Non-Muslims, like Zoroastrians, Christians, and Jews, were considered people of the book. They lived under a system that granted them legal protection in exchange for paying a special tax, the jizya, and accepting certain social restrictions. While this offered protection, their second-class status undoubtedly created a long-term pressure to convert, a process that unfolded over generations, not instantly. The most significant break with the past was the collapse of the Zoroastrian priesthood. This powerful class had been deeply intertwined with the Sasanian state, providing the divine justification for the monarchy. With their royal patrons gone, their power vanished. Many of their sacred fire temples were either converted into mosques or simply fell into ruin as Zoroastrian communities dwindled. Yet remarkably, so much of pre-Islamic Persian culture didn't just disappear, adapted. The ancient Persian New Year festival, Nowruz, continued to be celebrated, just with modified symbolism. Other old festivals were either given new Islamic interpretations or merged with Islamic holy days. Perhaps the most fascinating part of this story is how Persian culture didn't just survive, but went on to conquer its conquerors. The Arab leadership found Persian administrative and cultural traditions so advanced that they simply adopted many of them. The Caliphate's tax system, largely based on Sasanian models, court ceremonies, government organization, even architectural styles all showed a heavy Persian influence. During this turbulent period, some Zoroastrian communities did flee Persia, eventually settling in western India. Their descendants, known as the Parsis, continue to practice their ancient faith to this day. While the conquest marked the end of a Zoroastrian Persia, it also transformed Islam itself. As Persians converted, they brought their rich philosophical, literary, and administrative heritage with them, creating a new Persian Islamic synthesis that would define the Eastern Islamic world for centuries. The political end of the Sasanian Empire was just the beginning of a new chapter for Persian influence. After the conquest, Persia became a province of the growing Islamic Caliphate, first ruled by the Umayyads from their capital in Damascus. During this period from 661 to 750 CE, mid-rulers maintained a clear line between themselves and non-Arab converts. Persians who embraced Islam found themselves in a strange limbo. They shared the new faith but were still treated as second-class citizens, often excluded from high office and tax like non-Muslims. This discrimination created a deep well of resentment, especially in the eastern provinces where Persian identity remained incredibly strong. These tensions finally boiled over in the Abbasid Revolution of 750 CE. This powerful movement began in the Persian province of Khorasan, led by a charismatic Persian convert named Abu Muslim. He brilliantly united various disgruntled groups under a single banner, promising to restore what they saw as true Islamic values. The revolution was a success. It toppled the Umayyads and established the new Abbasid Caliphate, dramatically shifting the empire's center of gravity eastward. The Abbasids built their magnificent new capital, Baghdad, strategically placed near the old Sasanian centers of power. This wasn't just a change of address. It symbolized a profound shift in the Islamic world's entire orientation. Unlike their predecessors, the Abbasids fully embraced Persian culture and expertise. Suddenly, Persian converts were rising to the highest levels of government, the military, and intellectual life. Within a generation, the caliph's court had adopted Persian customs, clothing, and administrative practices. The story of the Barmakid family perfectly illustrates this transformation. Originally, Buddhist temple administrators from Central Asia, they converted to Islam and rose to become the most powerful ministers, or viziers, of the early Abbasid period. Under their guidance, the caliphate sponsored a massive translation movement, funding scholars to translate scientific and philosophical works from Greek, Sanskrit, and Middle Persian into Arabic. This incredible transfer of knowledge laid the foundation for the Islamic Golden Age. Language itself went through a fascinating evolution. Arabic became the language of religion and government, but Persian remained the language of the people. Over time, a new form of Persian emerged. It was written in the Arabic script and borrowed many Arabic words, but it kept its unique grammar. This new Persian, or Farsi, blossomed into a sophisticated literary language that would spread across Asia. By the 9th century, Persian intellectuals were at the forefront of Islamic scholarship, but they never lost their connection to their cultural roots. Think of giants like Al-Khwarizmi, who gave us the word algorithm, or Ibn Sina, known in Europe as Avicenna. They made groundbreaking contributions to math, medicine, and philosophy. Though they often wrote in Arabic, their work was infused with a distinctly Persian intellectual spirit. This intellectual reconquest went beyond science. Persian poetry, art, and concepts of kingship reshaped elite culture across the entire Islamic world. The fall of the Sasanian Empire was a political end, but the story of Persian influence was just getting started. It's one of history's most fascinating paradoxes, and the story of Persia after the Arab conquest is the ultimate example. While the Sasanian Empire fell militarily, its culture didn't just survive. It thrived, transforming its new rulers from within. Within 2 centuries, Persian administrative models, court etiquette, and artistic styles became so deeply woven into the new Islamic caliphate that they were inseparable. It was a conquest from within, a testament to a culture so rich and sophisticated it couldn't be erased. While other ancient civilizations vanished after being conquered, Persia managed to adapt, influence, and evolve, setting the stage for a remarkable comeback. That comeback was led by the Samanids. Emerging in the 9th century on the northeastern frontiers, this dynasty of Persian origin did something revolutionary. While technically serving the Abbasid caliphs in Baghdad, they built a state that was fiercely and proudly Persian. Their capital, Bukhara, wasn't just a political center, it became a global hub of culture and learning, earning the title, the Dome of Islam. Scholars and merchants flocked there from as far as China and Europe. The Samanids walked a brilliant tightrope. They were devout Muslims, but they also celebrated their pre-Islamic heritage. Their coins are a perfect symbol of this. One side had Arabic religious inscriptions, the other, ancient Persian symbols.
Wow.
They were both Muslim rulers and heirs to Persian kings. This fusion created a new model for civilization, proving that Persian identity and Islamic faith could not only coexist but flourish together. But their most enduring legacy was language. For centuries after the conquest, Persian was mostly a spoken language, with Arabic dominating writing and official life. The Samanid court changed everything. They began actively sponsoring poets and writers to use New Persian, or Farsi. They commissioned translations of major scientific and historical works from Arabic into Persian. Suddenly, Persian was a language of high culture, science, and Islamic scholarship once again. This sponsorship ignited a literary renaissance. It gave us figures like Rudaki, considered the father of Persian poetry, whose work set the standard for generations to come. More than that, the Samanids began collecting the ancient legends and histories of Iran's pre-Islamic kings and heroes. These tales passed down through oral tradition for centuries, are finally being written down. forming the foundation for what would become one of the world's greatest epic poems, the Shanmei, or the Book of Kings. Even the Samanids' architecture reflected this unique synthesis. The Samanid Mausoleum in Bukhara, one of the oldest Islamic monuments in Central Asia, is a masterpiece of design. Its perfect proportions and intricate brickwork, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow, showcase an incredible understanding of geometry and engineering, blending Islamic and pre-Islamic motifs. It's a physical representation of their cultural genius. But empires, even brilliant ones, face challenges. By the late 10th century, the Samanid state was under pressure from Turkic tribes moving in from the Central Asian steppes. In 999, their state finally fell to the Turkic Karakhanids and Ghaznavids. It seemed like the Persian revival might be over. But what happened next was the ultimate proof of the Samanid success. The new Turkic and, later, Mongol conquerors who swept across the region didn't erase Persian culture. Instead, they adopted it. In a stunning historical twist, Persian became the official language of government, literature, and court life for these new Turkic empires. The conquerors became the students. This cultural victory proved far more lasting than any military one. For the next 1,000 years, Persian would be the language of high culture from Turkey all the way to India. This pattern repeated itself with the next major power, the Seljuks. These nomadic Turkic warriors were a military force to be reckoned with. After converting to Sunni Islam, they stormed into Iran in the 11th century, defeating the existing powers and establishing the Great Seljuk Empire. You'd expect them to impose their own language and traditions, right? They did the exact opposite. The Seljuks were so impressed by the sophisticated Persian civilization they encountered that they absorbed it completely. They adopted Persian administrative systems, Persian court etiquette, and Persian artistic tastes. This created a powerful new Turco-Persian model. Turkic military might combined with Persian governmental and cultural expertise, this blueprint would be copied by countless empires for centuries. The Seljuks made Persian cities like Isfahan their capitals, pouring resources into new mosques, schools, and markets. The Great Mosque of Isfahan, with its iconic Foriwan design and stunning dome, is a testament to the architectural boom under their rule. They built caravanserais along trade routes, boosting commerce and spreading this hybrid culture even further. Most tellingly, Persian became the official language of the Seljuk court. While the Turkic rulers spoke their native tongue, all official business, all poetry, all history was written in Persian. They were Turkic warriors who ruled like Persian kings. This incredible absorption of one culture by another demonstrates the profound depth and resilience of the Persian identity. The legacy of the Samanids didn't just survive, it became the very foundation upon which future empires were built. The story of Persia is a powerful reminder that culture can be more resilient than armies, and that ideas can conquer even the mightiest of conquerors. It's a legacy that continues to shape the world to this day. Let's start with the Seljuks. Imagine fierce Turkic warriors thundering across the plains, skilled archers and horsemen who carved out a vast empire. They were the military masters, but they quickly realized that running an empire was a completely different ballgame than conquering one. This is where the fascinating partnership between Turkic military elites and Persian administrators comes into play. The perfect example of this was the relationship between Sultan Malik Shah and his Grand Vizier, Nizam-ul-Mulk. While the Sultan was out leading campaigns, a true warrior king, Nizam-ul-Mulk, a brilliant Persian administrator, was the one actually running the show. He was the genius who transformed the Seljuk realm from a mere collection of conquered lands into a sophisticated functioning empire. He established complex taxation systems and built a professional bureaucracy, creating the very foundations of a stable state. Nizam-ul-Mulk didn't just stop at practical administration. He literally wrote the book on how to govern. His work, the Siyasatna, or Book of Government, became a cornerstone of Islamic political thought for centuries. Drawing on ancient Persian traditions of kingship that predated Islam, it was a practical guide for rulers, covering everything from appointing the right officials to managing a network of spies. It showed that while the Turks held the sword, the Persians held the pen, and the pen was proving just as mighty. The Seljuks also left a massive mark on the religious and intellectual landscape. As champions of Sunni Islam, they wanted to counter the growing influence of Shia dynasties. Their most lasting contribution, the madrasa. These were formal schools, institutions of higher learning established across their empire. The most famous of these, the Nizamiya of Baghdad, founded by Nizam al-Mulk himself, became one of the most prestigious centers of learning in the entire Islamic world, a bit like the Harvard or Oxford of its day. This era of cultural and intellectual flourishing produced some truly incredible minds. Think of Omar Khayyam. Today, many in the West know him for his poetry, but in his own time, he was a polymath of staggering intellect. He was a brilliant mathematician who calculated the length of the solar year with astonishing accuracy, leading to a major calendar reform. He was a philosopher, a deep thinker, and yes, a poet whose famous quatrains explored life's big questions with a mix of skepticism, mysticism, and a love for life's pleasures. It's actually a great historical irony that his poetry, the asterisk Rubaiyat asterisk, was relatively unknown in the Persian-speaking world for centuries. It wasn't until the 19th century when an English writer named Edward Fitzgerald published a very liberal translation that Omar Khayyam became a household name in the West. He became posthumously world-famous, testament to the timeless power of his words. So, the Seljuk period presents us with a fascinating paradox. The conquerors were, in a way, culturally conquered. The Turkic rulers, despite their military dominance, recognized the superiority of Persian culture and administrative models. They didn't just preserve these traditions. They actively promoted them. This created a remarkable cultural continuity that would be repeated throughout history by other Turkic-led empires like the Ottomans and the Mughals, who also adopted and championed Persian culture despite their own non-Persian origins. But just as this Perso-Turkic civilization reached its zenith, a new storm was gathering on the eastern horizon. Storm that would threaten to extinguish Persian civilization entirely. The thundering hooves of Mongol cavalry. In the early 13th century, Persia came face to face with what was perhaps the most catastrophic invasion in its long history. Led first by Genghis Khan and later by his grandson, Hulagu Khan. The Mongol armies swept across the Iranian plateau with a brutality that is difficult for us to even comprehend today. They established their own kingdom, known as the Ilkhanate, a part of the vast Mongol Empire. The scale of the destruction was almost apocalyptic. Cities that were beacons of culture and learning were systematically annihilated. Take Nishapur, a vibrant center of scholarship. In 1221, it was methodically demolished. Historical accounts claim the Mongols killed almost every living thing, men, women, children, and even the city's cats and dogs before leveling the buildings. At the city of Merv, chroniclers reported that Mongol soldiers were each given a quota of people to execute, leading to the deaths of hundreds of thousands in a single week. This wasn't just conquest. It was systematic devastation. The Mongols destroyed the ancient Qanat irrigation systems that had sustained Persian agriculture for thousands of years. Libraries filled with priceless, irreplaceable manuscripts were burned to the ground. Government centers collapsed and urban populations plummeted as terrified survivors fled into the mountains and deserts. It seemed as though Persian civilization, which had absorbed so many invaders over the centuries, was finally broken. And yet, something truly remarkable happened. Within just 2 generations, the conquerors themselves began to change. Hulagu Khan, the destroyer of Baghdad, was a Buddhist. But his successors, most notably Ghazan Khan, who came to power in 1295, made a pivotal decision. He embraced Islam. This conversion marked a profound shift in how the Mongols governed. Instead of pure extraction and punishment, the Ilkhans started focusing on reconstruction, revenue, and administration. And to do this, they turned to the very people they had conquered, the Persians. At the heart of this incredible transformation was a man named Rashid al-Din, a Jewish physician who had converted to Islam. He became Ghazan Khan's trusted vizier. This brilliant statesman helped implement agricultural reforms, rebuild shattered cities, and stabilize the tax system. But his contribution went even further. Rashid al-Din authored the asterisk, Jami al-Tawarik, asterisk, or Compendium of Chronicles. This wasn't just another history book. It was an astonishing world history, synthesizing Persian, Mongol, Chinese, and Islamic traditions. It represented a revolutionary new way of looking at the past, a truly global perspective that transcended cultural boundaries. The relationship between the conquerors and the conquered continued to evolve in surprising ways. The Mongol elite, who were originally steppe nomads with their own language and customs, gradually adopted Persian as the language of their court. Persian culture, far from being extinguished, began to infiltrate and transform Mongol identity. Artists, poets, and scholars found new patrons among the Mongol aristocracy. Fields like astronomy, mathematics, and medicine once again flourished in Persian centers of learning. The Mongols' own traditions also played a role. Their original shamanistic beliefs were generally tolerant of other religions, accepting many paths to divine truth. This policy of religious tolerance allowed diverse communities to coexist and even thrive across the empire. Sufism, a mystical form of Islam, spread widely during this period, deeply influencing art, poetry, and daily life. But perhaps the most significant factor in Persia's recovery was something called the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace. The vast Mongol Empire, for all its brutality and conquest, created a relatively stable and secure zone stretching from China to the Mediterranean. The legendary Silk Road buzzed with activity like never before. Persian merchants could travel safely all the way to China and back, bringing with them goods, ideas, and technologies. In fact, the Mongols brought Chinese papermaking technology westward, which revolutionized record-keeping and the spread of information in Persia. And this leads us to the greatest irony of the Mongol period. These fierce warriors who almost wiped Persian civilization off the map ultimately became its patrons and promoters. By connecting Persia to a vast intercontinental trade network, introducing new technologies, and eventually adopting Persian culture as their own. The Mongols inadvertently created the conditions for a remarkable cultural renaissance. It's a powerful reminder that history is rarely a simple story of black and white, of heroes and villains. It's a complex, often paradoxical process, where even out of the greatest destruction, new life and new creativity can emerge. Imagine a civilization so resilient that it doesn't just survive its conquerors, it absorbs them. Within a century of the devastating Mongol invasions, the descendants of those who ordered mass executions were commissioning exquisite Persian manuscripts, building observatories for Persian astronomers, and speaking Persian at court. Once again, Persian civilization performed its most remarkable trick, transforming its conquerors while preserving its essential character. But while culture revived, it would take another 200 years for Persia to regain true political independence. This came in 1501 with a remarkable young leader named Shah Ismail I, just 14 years old when he began his conquest. Ismail founded the Safavid Empire, a dynasty that would transform Iran forever. He combined Persian and Turkic heritage with a charismatic religious authority that inspired fanatical loyalty. And early in his reign, he made a decision that would permanently alter the course of Persian history. He declared Twelver Shia Islam as the official state religion. This was revolutionary. While Shia Muslims had existed in Persia for centuries, they were a minority. The Safavids actively converted the population through a mix of persuasion, economic incentives, and sometimes force. This religious transformation created a sharp, definitive divide between Persia and its Sunni neighbors, especially the powerful Ottoman Empire to the west. The rivalry that followed sparked nearly 2 centuries of brutal warfare. With bloody battles fought over territory, resources, and religious legitimacy, the religious boundary Ismail created still defines modern Iran's relationship with much of the Middle East. For the first time since the fall of the ancient Sasanian Empire, Persia had a strong centralized state with a distinct religious identity. While the early Safavid military relied on Turkic tribal warriors, the empire's administration and cultural heart remained decidedly Persian. Court documents, poetry, and historical chronicles were all written in Persian, reinforcing the language as a pillar of national identity. The Safavids consciously connected themselves to ancient Persian kings through literature and art, masterfully weaving together Islamic and pre-Islamic traditions. The empire reached its absolute zenith under Shah Abbas I, known as Abbas the Great, who ruled from 1588 to 1629. Abbas was a true modernizer. He created a standing army equipped with firearms, reducing his dependence on the unpredictable tribal cavalry. He moved the capital to Isfahan and transformed it into one of the world's most breathtaking cities. His urban planning centered on the magnificent Nakshi Jahan Square, a vast open space surrounded by mosques, palaces, and bazaars that showcase the pinnacle of Persian architectural genius. Under Abbas, the Safavid economy thrived. Persian carpets became luxury items sought after throughout Europe and Asia. Silk production expanded massively, with Armenian merchants given special privileges to facilitate trade with European markets. The empire established diplomatic relations with European powers like England and the Netherlands, as well as the Mughal Empire in India and Ming China. It was a golden age of global connection. This era saw a remarkable cultural flowering. Persian miniature painting evolved into an incredibly sophisticated art form, with royal workshops producing exquisitely detailed manuscripts. Master calligraphers developed new styles that merged artistic expression with religious devotion. And of course, carpet weaving reached unprecedented levels of technical complexity and artistic refinement. Religious scholarship also flourished as Shia theologians debated doctrine and law, creating intellectual frameworks that continue to influence Iranian society today. European visitors to the Safavid court were often startled by its combination of extreme opulence and religious humility. Shah Abbas would receive foreign ambassadors in halls gleaming with gold and jewels, yet he and his courtiers remained at a practice symbolizing humility before that completely confused Europeans who were accustomed to elaborate footwear as a major status symbol. Perhaps the most profound legacy of the Safavids was their creation of a distinctly Iranian national identity, centered on Shia Islam. This religious and cultural identity has proven remarkably durable, surviving the fall of the Safavids themselves in the 18th century and persisting through subsequent dynasties, revolutions, and modern politics. By establishing Shia Islam as Iran's dominant faith, the Safavids permanently altered the religious map of the Middle East. But golden ages don't last forever. The collapse of the Safavid Empire in 1722 threw Persia into a period of chaos and uncertainty. Afghan invaders occupied Isfahan, ending 2 centuries of relative stability. Persian society fragmented, with various factions fighting for control of what remained of the empire. From this disarray, 2 remarkable but short-lived dynasties emerged that would shape the next chapter of Persian history: the Afsharids and the Zands. The first to restore Persian power was Nader Shah, a military commander of pure genius from the Afsharid tribe.
Rising from humble origins as a shepherd boy,
Nader assembled a formidable army that drove out the Afghan occupiers in 1729. Initially, he placed a Safavid puppet on the throne. But by 1736, he seized power directly and established the Afsharid dynasty. Nader Shah proved to be an ambitious expansionist with unparalleled military abilities. He recaptured territories lost to the Ottomans and Russians, then turned his attention eastward. His most spectacular campaign came in 1739 when he invaded India, defeated the mighty Mughal Empire, and occupied Delhi. The spoils were unprecedented. He seized the magnificent Peacock Throne, the legendary Koh-i-Noor diamond, and countless other treasures. So vast was the wealth he brought back that Nader cancelled all taxation in Persia for 3 years. But despite these incredible achievements, Nader's rule grew increasingly harsh and brutal. Constant warfare required heavy taxation, and his suspicion of potential rivals devolved into outright paranoia. He ordered the mass blinding of subjects in certain regions and executed countless nobles he perceived as threats. By 1747, his tyranny became unbearable, and he was assassinated by his own officers. With Nader's death, his empire quickly disintegrated, and Persia once again descended into factional conflict. From this second period of instability, a new leader emerged, one who offered a very different style of rule. His name was Karim Khan Zand, a tribal chieftain who established his capital not in a grand imperial city, but in the more modest city of Shiraz. Unlike the ambitious conquerors before him, Karim Khan never took the title of Shah or king. Instead, he ruled as Vakil Roaya, meaning regent of the people. This title reflected his governing philosophy. His reign, from 1751 to 1779, is remembered as an era of peace, justice, and prosperity. He focused on internal development, not foreign conquest. He revived trade, reformed the tax system to be more equitable, and funded major construction projects, including the beautiful Vakil Bazaar, Vakil Mosque, and Vakil Bath in Shiraz, which still stand today. Karim Khan's rule was a welcome period of calm after the storm of Nader Shah's tyranny. He fostered a revival of art and architecture, and his court was known for its relative simplicity and accessibility. However, Karim Khan's compassionate and localized approach had a downside. He'd failed to create a strong, centralized state that could survive him. Upon his death in 1779, his descendants fought among themselves for power, fatally weakening the Zand dynasty. From the north, a new, ruthless power was rising, the Qajars, led by Aga Muhammad Khan. In 1794, the last Zand ruler was brutally executed, and the brief, peaceful interlude of the Zand dynasty came to a violent end. From the ashes of the Mongol invasion to the splendor of Isfahan, from the world-conquering ambition of Nader Shah to the quiet prosperity under Karim Khan, this period of Persian history is a dramatic saga of rebirth, transformation, and enduring identity. It laid the foundations of modern Iran in ways that are still felt today. But after his assassination, a very different kind of leader emerged from the chaos. Enter Karim Khan Zand, a military commander from the Lur tribe. By 1751, he had consolidated power, but he did something remarkable. He refused to call himself Shah or King. Instead, he chose the title Vakil Raya, which means advocate of the people. This wasn't just a title, it was a philosophy. Karim Khan moved the capital to the beautiful city of Shiraz and focused on rebuilding his nation. Instead of foreign conquests, he built bazaars, mosques, and public bathhouses. He improved irrigation systems to help farmers and strengthened trade routes, bringing prosperity back to the land. His reign was a welcome period of peace and stability after decades of war and heavy taxes. Under his leadership, Shiraz blossomed into a cultural heartland. Poets and artists found a generous patron in Karim Khan, gardens bloomed across the city, and a unique architectural style emerged. If you visit Shiraz today, you can still see his legacy in the magnificent Vakil Bazaar and Vakil Mosque. Testaments to the refined aesthetics of the Zand period, even foreign visitors were impressed, noting the relative justice and prosperity of his rule. Unlike Nader Shah, who inspired fear across the region, Karim Khan sought peaceful relations with his neighbors whenever possible. He secured Persian control over the Gulf Coast and developed the port of Bushehr, turning it into a thriving hub for international trade. He earned respect not through fear, but through moderation and a genuine focus on improving the lives of his people. However, this golden age was fragile. When Karim Khan died in 1779 after nearly 30 years of wise rule, he left no clear successor. This power vacuum plunged the nation back into civil war as his relatives and commanders fought for control. The Zand dynasty grew weaker and weaker until it was finally overthrown in 1794. The contrast between Nader Shah, the mighty conqueror, and Karim Khan, the humble advocate, is stark. It helps explain why today Iranians remember Karim Khan with genuine affection, while Nader Shah is remembered more for his fearsome ambition. The fall of the Zands paved the way for a new, powerful dynasty, the Qajars. Their rise to power began in 1789, led by Aga Muhammad Khan, a leader from the Turkic Qajar tribe. He succeeded in reuniting Iran, but at a horrifying cost. His methods were brutal. After the city of Kerman resisted him, he infamously ordered thousands of eyeballs to be collected and brought to him as a symbol of his absolute authority. This brutal beginning set a dark tone for the Qajar dynasty, which would rule for the next 136 years. A period marked by both stunning cultural achievements and devastating political decline. The Qajars inherited a world that was changing rapidly. While Iran was still largely agricultural, the great powers of Europe, particularly Russia and Britain, were undergoing the Industrial Revolution. Their military and economic strength was growing exponentially. Iran, caught between these two giants, found itself increasingly vulnerable. This vulnerability became painfully clear during the Russo-Persian Wars in the early 19th century. The treaties that followed were humiliating. In 1813, the Treaty of Gulistan forced Iran to surrender its territories in the Caucasus, including what is now modern-day Georgia. Just 15 years later, the 1828 Treaty of Turkmenchay was even harsher. ceding Armenia and granting Russia special economic privileges inside Iran. These treaties were a national trauma, a stark demonstration of how far Iran had fallen behind in military technology. Recognizing this dangerous gap, some KR rulers, like Abbas Mirza and Nasir al-Din Shah, attempted to modernize. They sent students to study in Europe, established Western-style military academies, and built the country's first telegraph lines. A major milestone was the founding of Dar al-Funan in 1851, Iran's first modern university, teaching subjects like medicine, engineering, and military science. However, these reforms were often superficial. While the royal court lived in lavish luxury, the country's infrastructure remained undeveloped. The government was constantly short on cash, which led them to a disastrous policy, selling economic concessions to foreign powers. One of the most infamous examples was the 1872 Reuter concession. It granted a British baron almost total control over Iran's railways, mines, forests, and industrial development for 70 years. The deal was so outrageously one-sided that even rival Russia protested. As European influence grew, so did the anger and resistance among the Iranian people. The breaking point came in 1891, when the Shah granted a British company a complete monopoly over the country's tobacco production and sale. In response, a massive nationwide boycott erupted, led by influential religious leaders who declared tobacco use forbidden until the concession was cancelled. The protest was a stunning success, forcing the Shah to back down. It was a powerful demonstration of what popular resistance, united by faith and national pride, could achieve. This spirit of defiance eventually boiled over into the constitutional revolution of 1905. After years of economic hardship and foreign interference, a powerful coalition of merchants, clergy, intellectuals, and workers took to the streets. They demanded limits on the Shah's absolute power and the establishment of a government based on the rule of law. Faced with massive strikes and protests, the ruling Shah, Mozaffar al-Din, finally gave in. In 1906, he agreed to establish a constitution and a parliament, known as the Majlis. This was a revolutionary moment in Iranian history, creating a legislature and officially recognizing the rights of citizens for the very first time. But the fight was far from over. The next Shah, Muhammad Ali Shah, was fiercely opposed to the constitution. With Russian backing, he even bombarded the parliament building in 1908 in an attempt to crush the new democracy. The constitutionalists fought back and eventually regained control, but the revolution was critically weakened by foreign interference. By 1907, Britain and Russia had secretly signed a treaty to carve Iran into spheres of influence. The north fell under Russian control, the southeast under British control, with only a small neutral zone in between. Iran's sovereignty was shattered. In these dark times, a different kind of resistance began to grow. Persian intellectuals and writers looked to their nation's past for inspiration. They revived stories of pre-Islamic heroes and glorified the ancient achievements of the Persian Empire. This cultural awakening helped forge a new sense of modern Iranian nationalism, a pride in their shared history and identity that transcended the failures of the ruling dynasty. This powerful nationalist movement would continue to grow, eventually laying the groundwork for the overthrow of the Qajars and the dawn of a new era in Iran. Have you ever wondered how a 2,500-year-old monarchy could vanish almost overnight? How a nation, seemingly on a fast track to Western-style modernity, could pivot and become the world's first modern theocracy? Today we're diving deep into the dramatic story of Iran's Pahlavi dynasty, a tale of ambition, revolution, and the epic clash between tradition and modernity. Let's rewind to the early 20th century. Iran, then known as Persia, was in a tough spot. It had never been formally colonized, but foreign powers, particularly Britain and Russia, held immense influence, leaving the country politically divided and economically weak. It was a classic case of soft imperialism, and the nation's morale was at an all-time low. Then came 1925, a year that would change everything. A charismatic and formidable military officer, Reza Khan, staged a coup. He overthrew the last ruler of the old Qajar dynasty and crowned himself Reza Shah Pahlavi, kicking off a brand new era. His goal was monumental: to drag Iran out of its fractured, semi-colonial state and forge it into a powerful, centralized, modern nation. Reza Shah looked to his neighbor, Turkey, for inspiration. He saw what Mustafa Kemal Ataturk was doing and thought, that's it. It's what Iran needs. He believed that radical, top-down westernization was the only way to save the country from foreign meddling and internal decay. He didn't waste any time. His reforms touched nearly every part of Iranian life. He launched the country's first national railway, a massive project connecting the Caspian Sea to the Persian Gulf. He established modern schools and founded the prestigious Tehran University, aiming to cultivate a new generation of educated, secular Iranians. He also built a modern army and a centralized bureaucracy, ensuring their loyalty was to the state, not to local tribes or religious figures. But some of his most radical changes were also his most controversial. Reza Shah went after traditional customs with a vengeance. He banned the veil for women, a move that sent shockwaves through society. He also mandated that men wear European-style suits and hats. Imagine being a civil servant and being told you could lose your job or even be arrested for not wearing the right hat. As you can guess, these changes, forced from above, sparked significant resistance, especially from religious communities who saw their way of life under attack. In 1935, in a powerful symbolic move, Reza Shah officially changed the country's name from Persia to Iran. This wasn't just a name change, it was a statement. The word Iran is derived from Aryan, and by choosing it, he was emphasizing the nation's pre-Islamic ancient roots, tying his modernizing vision to a glorious past. He wanted to build a strong, independent state that was proud of its history. But despite his modernizing ambitions, Reza Shah was no democrat. He ruled with an iron fist. He crushed tribal autonomy, censored the press, and threw his political opponents in jail. Religious institutions were severely restricted. Even his land registration programs, which were meant to modernize property ownership, often ended up transferring vast amounts of wealth to his supporters and the new urban elite. He was a modernizer, but he was also an autocrat. Then, World War II broke out. Iran's strategic location made it crucial for the Allies. In 1941, concerned about Reza Shah's perceived sympathies for Germany, British and Soviet forces invaded and occupied the country. They forced Reza Shah to abdicate, sending him into exile. In his place, they put his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, on the throne. The young Shah initially ruled with limited power. For a while, it seemed like a more constitutional, democratic era might be dawning, with political parties flourishing. But that all changed in 1953. The popular and nationalist Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, made a bold move. He nationalized the British-controlled oil industry. This did not sit well with the West. In a now infamous operation, the CIA and Britain SMI-6 orchestrated a coup that overthrew Mossadegh and restored the Shah to absolute power. This single event would cast a long shadow, strengthening the Shah's rule, but also planting deep seeds of anti-Western sentiment that would blossom decades later. With his power consolidated, Mohammad Reza Shah launched his own ambitious modernization program in the 1960s. Known as the White Revolution, it was a series of sweeping reforms that included land distribution to peasants, granting voting rights to women, launching massive literacy campaigns, and promoting industrial development. On the surface, it looked like progress. Iran's oil wealth was booming, and the economy grew at a dizzying pace. The capital, Tehran, was transformed with modern skyscrapers, highways, and the influx of Western consumer goods. But this prosperity was a thin veneer. The wealth was not shared equally. The gap between the ultra-rich elite surrounding the Shah and the poor masses widened dramatically. Corruption was rampant. And while the Shah presented a progressive face to his Western allies, his modernization came at the cost of political freedom. His secret police, the notorious Savak, became a symbol of terror. They were known for their pervasive surveillance, brutal torture, and the ruthless crushing of any and all dissent. Opposition figures were imprisoned, exiled, or simply disappeared. There was no room for meaningful political participation. Perhaps nothing captured the growing disconnect more than the spectacle in 1971. As the 1970s wore on, the simmering resentment began to boil over. Strange and powerful coalition began to form against the Shah. You had religious conservatives who were appalled by the influx of Western culture and secular policies. You had intellectuals and students who demanded democratic freedoms. And you had leftists and workers who were fighting economic inequality. These incredibly diverse groups, who often disagreed with each other, found a common enemy: the Shah. The final act was about to begin. The events of 1979 in Iran represent one of modern history's most stunning political transformations. It wasn't just the end of a dynasty, it was the end of a 2,500-year-old tradition of monarchy in Persia. What made this revolution so remarkable was its sheer popular support and its completely unexpected outcome. By the late 70s, opposition to the Shah was everywhere. The religious conservatives, the educated middle class, demanding freedom, the workers struggling with inflation, even the traditional bazaar merchants who were chafing under the Shah's economic controls, all of them had reached a breaking point. The Shah's close ties to the United States, especially after the 1953 coup, made many see him as an American puppet, further eroding his legitimacy. And then, a voice emerged from exile. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a senior Shia cleric who had been a thorn in the Shah's side since the 1960s, became the spiritual and political leader of the revolution. From his exile, first in Iraq and then in France, he developed a powerful theory of Islamic government that rejected monarchy as illegitimate. His sermons, recorded on cassette tapes, were smuggled into Iran and passed from hand to hand. They were electric. They offered not just a religious justification for overthrowing the Shah, but also practical guidance for resistance. The revolutionary fire spread like wildfire throughout 1978. It started in January, when a government-controlled newspaper published an article insulting Khomeini. Protests erupted in the holy city of Qom. The government responded with force, and people were killed. According to Shia tradition, mourning ceremonies are held 40 days after a death. So 40 days later, new protests were held to mourn the dead, which led to more crackdowns and more deaths. This created a relentless 40-day cycle of protest, death, mourning that paralyzed the country and galvanized the opposition. Shah, who was also battling cancer, seemed indecisive and isolated. He wavered between cracking down and offering concessions, but it was too little too late. Despite having one of the world's largest and best-equipped militaries, and the full backing of the United States, the Shah's regime proved to be a paper tiger. Soldiers began to defect, refusing to fire on their own people. In January 1979, the Shah and his family fled Iran, never to return. 2 weeks later, Ayatollah Khomeini made a triumphant return to Tehran, greeted by millions of cheering Iranians. The monarchy had fallen. The revolution had won. A new, uncertain, and dramatic chapter in Iran's history was about to begin. This incredible story shows how deep cultural and religious currents can be far more powerful than military might or economic growth. Have you ever wondered how a 2,500-year-old monarchy could vanish almost overnight? How did a nation, seemingly on the fast track to modernization, suddenly pivot and become the world's first modern theocratic state? This is the dramatic story of Iran, a tale of ambition, revolution, and a clash of civilizations that reshaped the Middle East and the world. Our story begins in the early 20th century. While Iran was never formally colonized, it had lost its independence to a kind of soft imperialism. It was politically divided, economically exploited, and its spirit was fading. Then came 1925, a year that changed everything. Reza Khan, a charismatic officer from the Persian Cossack Brigade, seized power, overthrew the old Khayar dynasty, and crowned himself Reza Shah Pahlavi. He had a bold vision: to forge a modern, centralized nation from the fractured state he inherited. Looking across the border, he was inspired by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk's transformation of Turkey. Like Ataturk, Reza Shah believed that radical westernization was the only way to save Iran from foreign domination and internal weakness. His reforms were sweeping. He built Iran's first national railway, a steel spine connecting the Caspian Sea to the Persian Gulf. He established modern schools and the prestigious Tehran University, aiming to cultivate a new generation of educated secular Iranians. He created a modern army and a bureaucracy loyal not to tribes or clerics, but to the central government in Tehran. But his most controversial changes struck at the heart of Iranian identity. He banned the veil for women and mandated that men wear European-style clothing, including Western hats. Civil servants who resisted faced losing their jobs or even arrest. These top-down cultural decrees sparked deep resistance, especially from religious communities who saw their traditions under attack. In 1935, in a move dripping with symbolism, Reza Shah officially changed the country's name from Persia to Iran. This wasn't just a name change, it was a powerful statement. The name Iran derives from Aryan, a deliberate choice to emphasize the nation's pre-Islamic, ancient roots, aligning with his nationalist vision of a strong, independent state. Despite his modernizing drive, Reza Shah ruled with an iron fist. He crushed tribal autonomy, censored the press, and imprisoned his political opponents. Religious institutions were severely restricted. His land registration programs, while modern on the surface, often ended up transferring wealth to his loyal supporters and a new urban elite, creating new social tensions. Then, World War II erupted. In 1941, due to Iran's strategic importance and Reza Shah's perceived sympathies with Germany, British and Soviet forces invaded and occupied the country. They forced him to abdicate in favor of his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. This was a humiliating end to the reign of the man who had tried so hard to secure Iran's independence. The young Mohammad Reza Shah began his rule with limited power. For a time, Iran experienced a period of relative political freedom. But a storm was brewing. In 1953, the democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, nationalized the British-controlled oil industry, a move celebrated by Iranians as a declaration of economic independence. But this victory was short-lived. In a clandestine operation, the CIA and Britain's MI6 orchestrated a coup that overthrew Mossadegh and restored the Shah to absolute power. This single event would cast a long, dark shadow. It cemented the Shah's authority, but also planted deep seeds of anti-Western resentment that would blossom decades later. By the 1960s, with his power consolidated, Mohammad Reza Shah launched his White Revolution. This was a series of ambitious top-down reforms. Land was redistributed. Women gained the right to vote. Literacy programs were established. And industry was developed. On paper, it looked like progress. Iran's economy and society were modernizing. But these changes also disrupted traditional rural life and power structures. Fueled by booming oil revenues in the 60s and 70s, Tehran transformed into a glittering metropolis of modern buildings, highways, and Western consumer goods. But this prosperity was a mirage for many. The gap between the fabulously rich and the struggling poor widened dramatically. Corruption became rampant, seeping into every level of the system. The Shah's modernization came at a steep price. Political freedom, secret police, the infamous Savak, became a symbol of terror, known for its pervasive surveillance, brutal torture, and the crushing of all dissent. Opposition figures were imprisoned, exiled, or simply disappeared. While the Shah presented himself to his Western allies as a progressive monarch, at home he tolerated no real political participation. The disconnect reached its peak in 1971. The Shah staged an unbelievably extravagant celebration for the 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire at the ancient ruins of Persepolis. The event cost hundreds of millions of dollars, featuring lavish ceremonies, imported gourmet food, and a who's who of international celebrities. It was meant to showcase Iran's ancient glory and modern progress. Instead, for many Iranians, it just highlighted the obscene gap between the monarchy's opulent lifestyle and their own daily struggles. As the 1970s wore on, the simmering discontent began to boil over. A strange and powerful coalition formed against the Shah. It united religious conservatives horrified by Western cultural influence, intellectuals demanding democracy, and leftists fighting social inequality. Despite possessing one of the world's largest militaries and the full backing of the United States, the Shah's regime was about to discover just how fragile it truly was. The year 1979 would witness one of history's most stunning political transformations. This wasn't just the end of a dynasty. It was the end of 2,500 years of continuous monarchy in Iran. The world watched, astonished, as a popular revolution with broad support swept the country. By the late 70s, nearly every segment of Iranian society had a reason to oppose the Shah. Religious conservatives resented his secularization policies. The educated middle class, a product of his own reforms, craved the political freedoms he denied them. Workers struggled with high inflation, and the traditional bazaar merchants chafed under his economic controls. All these separate streams of anger converged into a powerful river of revolution. The Shah's close ties to the United States, especially after the 1953 coup, had destroyed his legitimacy in the eyes of many. He was seen as an American puppet. The memory of the Persepolis celebrations and the stories of Sava's brutality fueled the revolutionary fire. From his exile, first in Iraq and later in France, a powerful voice emerged. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, senior Shia cleric who had opposed the Shah since the 1960s, Khomeini articulated a compelling vision of an Islamic government, arguing that monarchy itself was fundamentally un-Islamic. His sermons, recorded on cassette tapes and smuggled into Iran by the thousands, became the soundtrack of the revolution. They provided both the religious justification and the practical guidance for the growing resistance. The momentum became unstoppable in 1978. It started in January when a government-backed newspaper published an article insulting Khomeini, triggering protests in the holy city of Qom. The government's violent crackdown only led to more protests. Following the Shia tradition of mourning the dead 40 days later, each protest cycle grew larger and more defiant, spreading from city to city. By late 1978, millions were marching in the streets, chanting death to the Shah. And independence, freedom, Islamic Republic, the Shah's regime, once seen as an unshakable pillar of stability, crumbled with shocking speed. On January 16, 1979, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi fled Iran, never to return. 2 weeks later, Ayatollah Khomeini made his triumphant return from exile, greeted by millions of ecstatic followers. The revolution had won. The age of kings was over, and a new uncertain era for Iran and the world had just begun. Iran, a name that brings to mind images of ancient empires, sweeping deserts, and a revolution that shook the world. But behind the headlines of nuclear deals and political tensions lies a story far more complex, a nation of profound contradictions. How does a country under some of the world's toughest sanctions not only survive, but project power across an entire region? And what happens when a young, modern population finds itself living under the rule of an aging revolutionary regime? This is the story of modern Iran, battle between the past and the future, faith and freedom, isolation and ambition. Let's rewind to 1979. The Iranian Revolution didn't just overthrow a king, it created something the world had never seen before: a modern Islamic republic. It's a unique blend of democracy and theocracy. Yes, Iranians vote for a president and a parliament, but there's a catch. Every single candidate, every single law, must first be approved by a powerful council of religious jurists. And above them all sits the supreme leader, commands the military, the courts, and the state media. Now, this system ensures that no matter who wins an election, the ideological core of the revolution remains untouched. It's a political model built for survival, and it has defined Iran for over 4 decades. At the heart of Iran's modern story is its nuclear program. Tehran has always insisted its goals are peaceful, for energy and medicine. But the international community, especially the West, has long feared that this is a cover for developing nuclear weapons. This fear led to crippling sanctions that aim to isolate Iran and force it to abandon its ambitions. The effect on the economy was devastating. Imagine a country rich in oil, suddenly unable to sell it. Banks were cut off from the global financial system. The currency, the rial, went into freefall, and inflation skyrocketed. For ordinary Iranians, this wasn't just a political headline. It was a daily struggle to afford bread, medicine, and basic necessities. The sanctions were designed to pressure the government, but it was the people who paid the steepest price. This pressure from the outside was matched by growing tension from within. In 2009, the world witnessed this firsthand. Following a disputed presidential election, millions of Iranians poured into the streets. This was the Green Movement. It wasn't a call to overthrow the system, but a demand for reform, for their votes to be counted. The response was swift and brutal. Security forces cracked down, arresting thousands, and the protests were silenced. But the Green Movement revealed a deep and growing crack in the foundation of the republic, a widening gap between the rulers and a significant portion of the ruled. The desire for change had been forced underground, but it hadn't disappeared. Yet, Even while facing economic ruin and internal dissent, Iran did something remarkable. It expanded its influence across the Middle East. It built a network of allies and proxies, what's often called the axis of resistance. In Lebanon, it armed and funded Hezbollah. In Syria, it propped up the Assad regime during the civil war. In Iraq, it backed powerful Shia militias, and in Yemen, it supported the Houthi rebels. This strategy turned Iran into a major regional power broker, giving it leverage from the Mediterranean to the Arabian Peninsula. But it also put it on a direct collision course with its rivals, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States, turning the Middle East into a chessboard for a new Cold War. Then, in 2015, a flicker of hope. Iran and 6 world powers, including the United States, signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPO, Iran nuclear deal. It was a landmark agreement. Iran agreed to severely limit its nuclear program and allow international inspections. In return, the crippling economic sanctions were lifted. For a brief moment, it worked. Foreign investment flowed back in, the economy began to recover, and for many Iranians, it felt like a new chapter was beginning. But this hope was short-lived. In 2018, the United States unilaterally withdrew from the deal, reimposing what it called a maximum pressure campaign of sanctions. The results were immediate and catastrophic. The currency collapsed again, inflation soared to new heights, and the economic hardship returned, worse than before. The window to the world had been slammed shut. This brings us to the most powerful force for change in Iran today, its people. Over 70% of the population is under the age of 40. They were born after the 1979 revolution. They're educated, connected to the internet, and exposed to global culture through satellite TV and social media. Their aspirations and lifestyles often clash with the strict religious and social codes imposed by the state. This has created a fascinating paradox. While the government censors the internet, Iranians are among the world's biggest users of VPNs to bypass the firewall. In a society where modesty is enforced, Iran has one of the highest rates of cosmetic surgery in the world, a quiet personal rebellion written on the face. Beneath the surface of official control, a vibrant underground culture of art, music, and film is constantly pushing boundaries. This simmering tension between the state and society boiled over in September 2022. The death of a 22-year-old woman, Mahsa Amini, while in the custody of the so-called morality police for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly, ignited a firestorm.
Ow.
The protests that erupted were unlike anything seen before. The slogan "Woman, Life, Freedom" became a global rallying cry. This movement was a direct challenge to the very pillars of the Islamic Republic. Schoolgirls took off their headscarves in defiance, women burned them in public squares, and men marched alongside them. The regime responded with its familiar playbook of a violent crackdown, but something fundamental had shifted. Even after the protests subsided, acts of defiance continue. Women walking in Tehran without a hijab are no longer a rare sight. It's a daily act of quiet courage. So where does Iran go from here? The nation stands at a crossroads. It's a story of incredible resilience, but also of deep-seated conflict. On one side, you have an aging revolutionary elite, determined to preserve their ideology and hold on to power. On the other, a young, restless generation demanding more freedom and a better future. The economic pressures are immense, and the social contract between the state and its citizens is fraying. The question that hangs over Iran is whether the Islamic Republic can evolve to meet the demands of its people, or if the growing chasm between the rulers and the ruled will inevitably lead to another seismic shift. History teaches us that the Persian spirit is one of endurance and adaptation, through empires and invasions, revolutions and sanctions. The identity of this ancient land has always found a way to survive and to be reborn. The story of modern Iran is far from over. Its next chapter is being written right now, on the streets, in the homes, and in the hearts of its people. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into modern Iran. If you found this video insightful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content that explores the complex forces shaping our world. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.